Thank you for coming. Does anybody know what time it is? You guys?
Got a digital watch.
Yeah. Earlier today, I was trying to think how many things in my house either tell the time or know the time. Thermostats and all these computers. And I'm sure I missed some, but I came up with 29.
Oh,
So 29 things. And to think that, it wasn't that long ago when many people relied on the town to provide that service of letting them know what time it is. So we have two people here who are clock minders, and they keep the clock and the tower going, and they're going to give us some inside information on the clock itself and on the history of the town hall building. So this is Lou Franco, who is, you're the master clock winder or something? Or?
The captain, whatever you want to
Captain. Clock winder to end-all clock winder or something. And Bill Tyler, who's also the vice president of the Historical Society and a fellow winder. And
Newly appointed.
Well, almost a year.
Oh, yeah.
Still new. Okay.
Yeah, very
You had it.
And I've been at this 17 years.
So, yes. So anyway, enjoy the talk, and thank you both for all your hard work getting this set up.
Thank you.
Thank you, Joe.
Good evening, everybody. Thanks for coming. Really appreciate the turnout. I think we put together a pretty good show for you. It's going to be interesting and informative. I've learned a lot myself doing the research on it. It's going to be presented in two parts. Obviously, I'm going to start, and I'm going to show you the history of the town hall from when it was constructed, how it was constructed, and what it is today. And that will lead into Lou's presentation of town hall clock, how it operates, how it's maintained. With that being said, also, I was thinking about it. If you could hold any questions till the end, appreciate it. It would make things a lot smoother. We'll be happy to answer any questions we can if we can. So, a little bit about myself. I've lived in Lunenburg my whole life. I'm the fifth generation of my family to live in town. I guess I even qualify under the late Joe Bellows had a rule. He said that you had to qualify as Lunenburg, you had to have multiple grandparents buried in town. So I guess I qualify for both halves. As the title says, let's turn the clock back to 1830. This is an image of the Methodist Church, and I'm sure you're all familiar with that. And the reason I have that up there is because first of all, it was built in 1830, and it's still in the same place. It hasn't changed at all. But the reason I bring that up is because back when Lunenburg started, churches and meeting houses were pretty much the same thing. I mean, after dwellings were built, the next thing they built was a church or a meeting house, and it was used for double purposes. So that's the reason I wanted to show you this slide. But in 1830, the Methodists, the Congregationalists, and to some degree the Unitarians were starting to come into town. Like I said, the Methodists had this church. The Congregationalists needed their own meeting house. This gentleman here is named Daniel Putnam. Some of you may be familiar with him, some of you may not. He was a fairly well-to-do individual in town. He owned a lot of land. And some reports had it that he actually donated the land for the Methodist Church. I'm not totally sure about that, but some reports say he did. But he definitely donated the land for the Congregational Church. He owned the first general store in town. That building is gone now, but he built and operated the current building that is housed the Hadwin Market. It also had Warren Lewis's store. Kyle and Earl Brown had a store. It was a post office, Shaft's Pharmacy. So he was a fairly well-to-do individual, and like I say, he had a lot of land. This is a drawing, an artist's drawing of the built Congregational Society. It cost $2,662 to build this structure. It was set roughly in the upper common where the flagpole is. It was facing east. The structure was 64 feet by 50 feet with two monumental columns in the front, 3 recessed doors, and there was a bell in the tower that cost approximately $400. It was paid for by private subscription. The new meeting house was dedicated Christmas Day in 1830, and the pews were sold at auction, raising $2,720, which more than the cost of the building itself. Now, this next slide, this is a layout of the meeting house for all the pews. And the red arrow right there points to one gentleman called Phineas Goodrich. And the reason I pointed him out, the slide after, I actually have a copy of his actual deed to the pew. The deeds were basically, it was a deed, and you had it for your whole family, for your whole life. But I wanted to point out some other names here that are fairly well known. I guess Cyrus Kilburn. There's a Peabody, there's Oliver and Joseph Peabody. And one thing I find kind of humorous, and my colleagues at the Historical Society will agree that whenever we do research anywhere for anything, we always find a Proctor somewhere. What it is, we always got one. Lo and behold, we have an Edmund Proctor here, and we have he's there again. But it's kind of an ongoing joke. It's just Proctor, Harley, I mean, they just never end. So this is the deed I was referring to. It says that the Congregational Society constituting the first parish in the town of Lunenburg in the county of Worcester and Commonwealth of Massachusetts in consideration of $49 paid by Phineas Goodrich of said Lunenburg gentlemen, the receipt whereof the said society do hereby acknowledge, do hereby give, grant, settle, and convey unto the said Phineas Goodrich, his heirs and assigns, pew number 14 on the lower floor of the Congregation meeting house at said Lunenburg. And it's signed out here by the, I guess it would be the selectmen, or maybe not the selectmen, probably the church owner, I would guess. 5th day of January, 1831. And then one reference up here, it says on the lower floor of the Congregation meeting house. There was only one floor structure. When they're talking about the lower floor, there was a gallery. I can go back one slide here without destroying this program. See, there's some stairs there. They went up to the gallery that was above there. It wasn't the higher second floor. Now, this slide here is going to give you a much better idea of what the building looked like when it was first constructed. The building on the left is a Congregational Church, and that was built in 1844. When that was built, it had no clock tower. That was added probably in the late 1800s. So you can see the similarity between the two buildings. I mean, this is almost a mirror image of that, with the pillars and the recessed doors, the gable front end. But it gives you a better idea than the drawing. The drawing is, it's fine, but it's much easier to see a picture. Now this image here is attempting to show you where it was located. This corner of this building right here is actually the Congregational Church that we have right now. It's on the southeast corner, and this arrow is pointing to a barn of this building. It was actually this barn is the same barn, but this is a photographic image of the Revere house that sat on the Ritter property. So if you can envision it between a Congregational Church and the Ritter Library, that's where that meeting house stood. Now, in 1834, the Unitarians were sharing this church with the Congregational Society as well. And a dispute arose over the Reverend Ebenezer Hubbard. He was a Unitarian, and he had been a preacher since 1828. And his attempt to eliminate all but Unitarians from the Congregational created such a fervor that it left only 42 of the original 150 members. So he was removed in 1834 from being a preacher. But unfortunately, the poor man still considered himself a preacher. And the story has it that he would, every Sabbath, he would walk into church with a sermon in hand, and he would try the door and find it locked. And he would just turn around and go home. And apparently he did this for years and years and years, and year after year, until the point in about 1858 he was committed to an asylum. So apparently this back and forth walk wasn't good for him. Anyway, the years of discontent and ownership battles continued until about 1863, when the church closed its doors. On April 3rd, 1867, the church was sold to the town for $1,500. A committee was formed to determine how this building could be converted for town purposes. A fellow by the name of Lucius Aldrich, which you'll see later in a slide, was paid $10. The whole $10 for plans to move and raise the church 12.5 feet to create 2 stories. Now, one would think the task of moving a building that size is quite a formidable task. So they saw an ad in the Fitchburg Directory of 1865 of Seth Twitchell, building mover. So they hired Mr. Twitchell to move the building some 200 feet to the north and raise it up. Another question someone might ask is, well, why wouldn't you just, it might be easier just to build a new building. But apparently the cost of labor and the availability of materials, it was much cheaper to move the building. And we find it in our research all the time that buildings are moved all the time. It seems like a huge task, but they still did it all the time. This is a picture of Mr. Twitchell. He was a building mover for over 50 years. He moved the State House in Columbia, South Carolina. He moved the Fort William Henry Hotel in Lake George and many other buildings in Fitchburg. This is to give you an idea of how a building is raised. This image on the left, it's called a horn jack or a building jack. It's used, this is a more modern image. Those jacks are a little different, but it's the same principle. They could use as many as 20, 25 around the building, depending on the size of the building and how big it was. They would turn small amounts a little bit at a time until it was raised to the position where it would accommodate whatever way they wanted to move the building. Now, some of you may be familiar with this image here. That is the current Eagle House. It was called the Bellows House when it was first built. And the purpose of this slide is to show you the different ways or different purposes or different methods people use to move buildings. We don't know how the building was moved, the town hall was moved, because we don't really know that. But we're surmising that in short distance movements, a lot of times they would make a rail system like this. And they always do it in the wintertime when the ground was frozen, because it made it move an awful lot easier. The Eagle House actually was sat where the Boys and Girls Club is right now. That was moved a very short distance as well. Probably about the same distance as the town hall was moved. This was another method used. They used log rollers, they call them, and if you had a big enough supply of them and some oxygen, you could move a building. I don't envision that that's what they use for this, because the building's too big, but it's certainly possible. This image here is to show you a building that's raised quite a good height. And the reason I wanted to show you this was when I was doing the research for the program, I saw a lot of references in a building report, building expense report that I'll get to in a minute or two. But I had a lot of reference to sleepers, and I couldn't figure out what sleepers were. I assumed it wasn't people sleeping. I did a little research, and I found out that these beams here, it almost kind of looks like Jenga, but it's they would raise the building up a certain way, a certain point, put them up, until they got to the point where the final height they wanted to do. Apparently, this building, that's the final height. The height of this building, it looks like what they're trying to do. And I don't know if anybody noticed recently, but a building was moved in town. Proctor Landscape moved their red barn to the back of the property. I assume they used a more, modern method to move it than these people did. But I found it kind of ironic that the building was being moved as I was trying to put this together. This again is to show you the transition here. Envision, if you will, this is the former meeting house here. This is the new town hall, obviously, but if you look at these three windows here, envision them at ground level. That's where they were. These three windows were the triple door entrance. You can still see the same square pilasters here, up and down on the same building. Just to give you an idea, you can kind of see the old building in there. If you take away the clock tower and envision the windows down to the ground level, I think it's kind of easy to see. The original bells were replaced in 1878. This is the detailed expense I was going to show you, and lo and behold, there's another Proctor. This is Lucius Aldrich, the gentleman I told you. He was paid $10 for the plans for moving the building. Mr. Twitchell for moving and raising the church, $375, which back then that was quite a bit of money. I reference this too because it says for gilding the ball and vane, which I assume is the weather vane that used to be on the town hall, which disappeared, as everybody knows. And I just thought it was interesting to point out. There's some more familiar names here. Cyrus Kilburn. Cyrus Kilburn is a gentleman that mapped the town in 1834, and that's one of our biggest sources of research in the Historical Society. Is he researched every single building that was standing in town in 1834. Stillman Stone, the old Stone Farm, A.K. Francis, Proctor again, George Jewett. So just some familiar Lunenburg names that people would be familiar with. So the final cost was $9,452 for the movement, raising it, and all the things that they had to do to it. And at the end, this is like a credit page where they return some items. Again, these reference to sleepers are returned, and all these other things. They're so close in their calculation. Shaving sold to Moses McIntyre for 70 cents. Right down to the penny, they kept track of things. So anyway, we made the total cost of the hall $9,165.32. This is from the 1868 town report. And the building was dedicated September 10th, 1868. This image here, the purpose of this is for my purpose because I find it it's my favorite picture of the town hall. We have hundreds of them in the Historical Society, but this one here, just something about it with the Roman horse and carriage. It's just an idyllic picture, and I really like it. Over the years, the town hall was used for a lot of purposes. It was used for the work of the Women's Christian Temperance Union meetings. It was used as a library from 1868 to 1909 until the river was built. They played basketball upstairs. They had a full-size basketball court. And they also had Catholic services were held there in the 1950s before the Catholic churches were built in town. Now, this is Mr. Jacob Fairbanks. He donated the current clock to the town in 1894. He had a farm on, on Mass Ave, located where Walmart is. For years, that hill was called Fairbanks Hill. Now we're back to 2019. I hope you enjoyed this trip back in time, and I hope you come away with a better understanding of how this building we call Town Hall played a part in Lunenburg's history. But before I turn the program over to Lou, I want to show you this slide, which is starting in 1830, the bell ringers were appointed. They have the privilege of ringing the town bell every day at noon, 9 p.m. for Sunday services. And you see they weren't paid a great deal, but it was more of a privilege and an honor to have that title. They were appointed as the Lunenburg clock winders are appointed as well. I consider it a privilege to be a member of this group. And with that being said, I give you Lou Franco.
Okay, thanks, Bill. Based on the standards that Bill set out, I am not a Lunenburger. I hail from New Jersey, but I moved to Lunenburg with my wife in 2001. I love this town. When I was growing up in New Jersey, my parents had an 1840s tall case clock in their dining room. It's still there. They still live in the house that we lived in when I was born. And from the time I was a small child, I was enthralled with this clock. I'd go in there. I remember when my mom would be preparing dinner, and she'd tell me it's all, to go in and listen to the clock because it was almost 5 o'clock or almost 6 o'clock, and I'd have to run in there and listen to it chime. And when I was about somewhere between 11 and 13, I was given the job. I asked for it, petitioned for it, and I got it, of winding and setting the time on this clock every week. And I was really intrigued by it and how it worked. And the clock repairman would visit, or the maintenance person would visit, I don't know, once a year, I forget how often. And I always used to love when he would pull the top off of it, and I could see the workings inside. And that really instilled in me an interest in mechanical devices and the history of invention and technology. And, maybe it has something to do with where I am today. I had my career as a patent lawyer because I have an interest in the history of technology and securing protection for innovation. So, with that said, I'm using this last slide right here to show you where the journey up into the clock tower begins. Right here, on the second floor, roughly these windows, is the town manager's office and the executive secretary or executive assistant to the town manager. And there's a door in there that leads to upstairs. I'm going to end Bill's show now and start you here. Okay, so this is the door I'm talking about. And we're going to take a virtual walk upstairs. Whoops. It's going well. So you have to be a bit brave to be a clock winder. There's all sorts of fun stuff up there too. So I'll pause when I get around the corner here. I mean, some of their wasps, there's all sorts of great stuff. I should have actually shown a picture of this giant hornet's nest that was up there. It was at the other end of the building. But you can see the nice post and beam construction, nice 19th century solid construction. Right here, this is one of the weights. This is the weights that drive the bell. We're going to talk in detail about the weights shortly. But you walk right by the weights. The other set is cranked up at this point, so you can't see it. And then the final ascent to the winding room where the movements are housed, where the winding occurs once a week, is up this set of stairs here.
I'm not sure that's OSHA compliant.
Okay, I'm going to pause this briefly. Okay, these are the movements, and we're going to talk in detail about those in a moment. But occasionally we need to go to even higher levels than this room. And to do that, we have to go up this set of stairs right here. And out that hatch, that doesn't have a hinge or anything, you just lift it out and move it over. And when you do that, you're outside. Okay, so... Okay, these are two different photos of we're back in the winding room now, where the movements are housed. Photos from two different angles. This is when you first walk in, and this is from the corner of the room from the other side. As a reference, here's the indicator face on the inside. That's the same object. Here is the pendulum rod, right here. This drum rolls the cable, or stores the cable that supports the weights that power the hammer to strike the bell. This drum winds the cable that supports the weights that powers the movement of the clock to keep time, and provides energy to the pendulum through this escapement mechanism. We'll do a little more detail on the escapement shortly. There are some interesting plates on the chassis for these two plates right here, and these are details of them. The first plate tells us that this is a Seth Thomas clock, manufactured in 1894. As a matter of fact, October 10th is when it came off the assembly line, or maybe it wasn't an assembly line, it might not have been. And then this is, you heard Bill reference Mr. Fairbanks earlier, Jacob Fairbanks. He was the one who presented the clock to the town, and there's a plate in his honor on the chassis. On a weekly basis, the clock is wound weekly by the team of winders. There are 6 clock winders, and each of them takes 2 months per year. Usually a winter month, which is torture, and a summer month. Well, the people that get spring and fall have it easy. It's the winter and summer. It's torture. And the building is extremely leaky in terms of, you can see through these boards out to the outside, and wind comes through. It's very charming. And in the winter, and when you get a high wind, it creaks and rocks a little bit. So, in addition to winding, and this is actually a video, occasionally, usually not weekly, but twice monthly, say, we also oil the clock. The winder who goes up there is responsible for that. And also adds or subtracts time. It may creep ahead, it may fall behind. And that actually is also, believe it or not, it's a function of temperature as well, because the period, or how fast the pendulum swings, it depends on how long the pendulum is, and when it gets really cold, it shortens a little bit, and it may add, and that makes the period of the shorter, so that the clock runs fast. And it may run fast 2 or 3 minutes a week. It's not much, but it's an extremely accurate piece of equipment for 1894, to be certain. So here's some of what goes on a weekly basis.
Now we're going to demonstrate winding of the clock and cranking up the bell weights. We take this crank right here. This is the same crank for both shafts. And you see it has a square hole. This is a square ended shaft.
That's me.
And we put it here. This is the drum for bringing up the weights that energize the pendulum through the escapement. And so we just give this a few cranks at a time. And we can't go for too long at once, because if we take the tension off the cable for too long, the pendulum will stop, because there's no weight energizing the pendulum on each swing. And so that's just to demonstrate the purposes. I'm not going to wind it the whole way all the time, this time around. So this is the weights for driving the hammer to strike the bell. Give it a couple times as well. this one is cranked up a much farther distance than the other one, and it's a much heavier set of weights. And then we know when to stop because we have these cables painted, so we know where we wanted the weights to stop, and we painted them so that we don't have to look at the weights, where the weights are every time.
Okay, now let's take a look at the weights. These are the weights. This smaller set is for the timekeeping. That's the power source for keeping the time through the escapement mechanism. And I'll explain a little bit about what that is in a minute. This is about 125 pounds right here. Each one of these slabs is about 25 pounds. And this is the set of weights for energizing the bell strike. And that's about 400 pounds right there. This set of weights descends over the course of a week, and it needs to be cranked up about a distance of about 20 to 25 feet. This set of weights, of course, it's the heavier one. It goes about 25 to 30 feet over the course of a week. So it'll drop about 5 and a little less than 5 feet a day, 4.5 feet or so. This is the video, nice and creaky, huh? That's Bill cranking. So that one goes up pretty nicely and pretty quickly. It's basically, it's not a 1-to-1 ratio, but it's each crank brings it up, maybe a foot. Now this is the escapement. That set of weights that just got cranked up is what provides the power. It's the power source for this. I'm just going to explain a little bit in case people are not familiar. But here's an everyday example. If you take a string and a ball and you hold it up and you let it swing, well, it's eventually going to stop, right? It dampens out. The oscillation dampens to zero eventually. First it swings, 98% of its original amplitude, and then, 98% of 98%, and eventually that gets to zero, or, it eventually just stops. So what has to happen is that on each oscillation or swing of the pendulum, it needs a little boost. It needs something to kick it and bring it back up to full height. And that's the escapement. And it gets its energy from that set of weights dropping a very incremental, imperceptible amount each time one of these two teeth escapes. Now, you'll see this in action in a minute. It would take hours to notice the weights falling at all. But they're very heavy, and so they don't need to fall much to provide the energy required, even for an hour's worth of power. Here is the escapement in action.
This is our new escapement wheel. Just arrived last week after 4.5 or so months of silence. The clock is back up and running. The old escapement wheel, to the best of my knowledge, was the one that was installed with the 1894 update. And
I'm going to stop it here for a second. Just watch the action of this, and I should explain. This was replaced. We had to source this. We have a contractor that comes every quarter who does more intricate maintenance of the clock, things that we don't touch. He's sourced this wheel for us in upstate New York. It was custom manufactured. We couldn't source an original. So it is, to our knowledge, and it's a little newer looking than the rest of the parts here, it is, to our knowledge, the only replacement part on this entire mechanism that's not from 1894. Now you'll notice that these teeth are pitched a little bit. They don't come out perfectly radially from the center. It's pitched. And you have these pallets right here that alternate grabbing teeth and stopping the tooth on part, and then allowing a tooth to, or releasing a tooth, or allowing a tooth to escape. That's where the term escapement comes from. Watch what happens. So when it does this, it pushes the pendulum.
And the installation of new mechanics up here, so 123 years.
Push.
Because this went out in October of 2017.
Push. This is the set of weights that I talked about earlier, the much heavier set that is used to energize the bell strike. It's very strenuous to crank up, and it is in order to make it even possible, it's heavy, it's a real workout. It's mostly a cardiovascular workout. It takes, you can do it in like sort of 3 or 4 cranking sessions, 6 to 8 feet at a time. It's heavy, and it's, here's Bill. Sorry. Okay. Now I will stop this at times too. He's cranking at about the same rate as he was cranking the other one in terms of rotations of the crank, but it's moving much more slowly. The reason for that, well, I'll show you the reason in a minute. You see how high that goes. All right? The bottom of the weights, once they're cranked up, goes right about here. It's barely visible through this window. This window is where he's winding. That's the window to the room where the movements are housed. So you can look out and see where the weights are. You can do it that way, or we just painted the cables like I referenced previously, so we know exactly where to stop. So he's cranking away. Now I'll bring you back here. Just a little bit of mechanics without getting crazy. Because it would be impossible, or nearly impossible, to crank this up if it were had the same pulley arrangement as the other set of weights. You see that it has a doubling block. There are actually 4 iterations of the cable right there instead of just 2. Instead of just the cable coming up around one pulley, it comes around twice. This is a doubling block. So that makes the effort per crank, it halves it. That's the trade-off. You have to do a certain amount of work, mechanical work, to bring this thing up every week, and that work is the same no matter what. But, so you've got force times distance. If you want to reduce that force in half, well, every time you crank the crank, you're only going to get half the distance. That's the trade-off. You're going to go half as fast. But that's the mechanical trade-off. And look at those beams and posts. So all told, it takes me about probably 4 or 5 minutes to crank this thing up. I'm glad you're not telling me it only takes you 2 minutes.
You'll get better. Yeah.
Okay, so now we're back in the housing of the movements room, and this is a video of. You'll see everything in motion. Try to study everything. It's long enough that you can do it. You'll see the pendulum swing. You will see the escapement rocker move with the pallets and the escapement wheel. You will see this. This is going to be on the hour, and I did it at 12 o'clock, I think, so you could watch a lot. You see this sort of cam wheel here that actuates this lever, and you'll see what that does in a minute. But let me talk a little bit more about this. This indicator face right here, it's a pretty good view of it. When everything is synchronized, that tells us what time it is on the faces outside. Except that it doesn't always agree with what the time is outside. It has a minute hand and a second hand. So the real hope when you go to wind the clock is that all 4 faces out. I'm pointing, why am I doing that? Is that all 4 faces agree with each other. We don't necessarily care if they agree with this. So before I go in, and I'm sure each winder does this, I will note the time on my cell phone, and I will look at the clock and note how many minutes fast or slow it is. And then I know I need to add 2 minutes when I go in because it's 2 minutes slow. Well, there's a little key that we take, and it's not visible on this, and there's a little nut that we turn, and we can advance not only this indicator face by 2 minutes, but those 4 sets of hands. And this shaft right here, this little 5/8" diameter shaft, controls everything. That's what drives the hands on all 4 faces of the clock outside. And I'd say that's about 20 feet long at least. And it goes up through 2 floors. So it's easy to add time because all you have to do is take that key and add 2 minutes or whatever. But you can't subtract time. You can't turn the hands backwards. It's not good for the mechanism. So if it's 2 minutes fast, we have to stop it. So we'll just stop the pendulum and let real time catch up and then restart it. Now, there are all sorts of little compensation factors that go on. If the winder, the winder will notice, say, the first week, how much time the clock has gained or lost. And if it is gaining, say, 2 minutes or 3 minutes, my personal procedure is it's going to be 7 days before I wind it again, so I will make it 1.5 minutes slow on when I wind it. And by 3 days later, it's right on time for like a day and a half. And then by the end of the week, it's fast by a minute and a half. Instead of just being, fast by 3 minutes at the end of the week. So now when our contractor, Greg Sale, comes, he adjusts the beat of the clock. He has a sophisticated, piece of equipment that actually tells him, is this thing right on in terms of the beat? And then you can adjust. You adjust the length of the pendulum. That's what controls how fast or slow the clock runs. But 2 or 3 minutes over the course of a week on an 1894 mechanical device is pretty good. That's only 180 seconds. And we think it's seconds because the oscillation here, I believe it is a seconds clock, which is that the full oscillation is 1 second. So let's watch this in action and note all the parts moving. This lever. Escape. Beautiful piece of machinery. Okay, this is another video. It's going to sweep along here, and it's also on the hour, but it's going to show more detail about what happens when the bell is struck. So I'll talk about it. Notice that this wheel is actually this lever. This lever is pulling on this cable, which is pulling on that lever. Force is transferred through that rod to this lever, which pulls down on this cable. That cable goes up through the ceiling, and I'll show you where it comes out. So there's a hole in the ceiling through which that piece of cable goes out, and it's only about 3 feet long, and I'll show you where it leads. So now we go up these steps, open the hatch, and come out here. This bell is immediately over the movements that we just wound. For the sake of scale, there's Bill. So that gives you a sense of the size of the bell. Okay, this could be loud. This is what's happening. Yeah, this is what's happening outside when that lever is getting pulled. And to spare you, I've only done 3 strikes here. That's the cable that you saw going up through the ceiling, and here's about the other half of it. It's roughly half and half, half in, half out. It's got nice reverb too. It goes for a while. Just to give you a sense of orientation, this is Main Street, there's 2A. So the hammer, there's only one hammer, it's closest to the, immediately adjacent to the opening to the front, when you face the building. There are some interesting inscriptions on the bell, they're hard to see, so I've transcribed them here. This indicates that the bell was made for Lunenburg and presented to, or delivered and installed in Lunenburg in January of 1878. And this is the maker, Meneely and Kimberly of Troy, New York. Now, we're going to go up one more level. There's another level below this. Remember that main shaft that I showed you coming off of the movements? It goes straight up, that vertical shaft. It goes through this area, then into a crawl space above this, which is really exciting to get up to. It's It's like a 2x4 ladder that, it's crazy. So that shaft comes into this junction or distribution box right here. It's a vertical shaft. You can't see the shaft. I haven't seen the inside of this box, but there's 98% chance that what's in here is a bevel gear, and then 4 more bevel gears. They might not be bevel gears. They may just be gears, flat gears that mesh. But they mesh at 90 degrees, or perpendicular to one another. So that one shaft, along with the gear at the end of it, which is probably a bevel gear, intermeshes with a gear at the end of each one of 4 shafts. That's these right here. This one's disconnected. I'll tell you why in a minute. So each one of these shafts leads to the hands on a face. Each face has a door. So that you're seeing this is behind the door. I never knew these doors existed. It makes sense that they did until I went up there with our contractor, Greg. I think this was in the beginning of 2018, maybe the fall of, well, it wouldn't be the fall. I think this was spring of 18. So this isn't, I mean, you can kneel in here, or I can kneel in here, maybe a lot of people probably can't. And so if the faces aren't agreeing with each other, if the hands on the faces don't agree with each other, they have to be manually set to the right place. Well, these shafts are intermeshed. They have to be disconnected. So in this case, the front face was off. The time was off on the front face. So the shaft is disconnected with a collar right here, with just a set screw. And then this door is opened, and the hand is literally moved by manually. This is the hour hand, and this is the minute hand. So Greg sticks his head out the window and says that's about 11:03 or whatever time it is. And then, once he likes where the hand is, he reconnects the shaft. This right here, this is the first end of the shaft. At the second end of the shaft, that's what this looks like right here. It drives these two gears. One is for the minute hand, one's for the second, for the hour hand. I think I covered everything there. Now, just for a sense of scale and also for some humor, here's a picture of Greg sticking his head out this window and me taking a picture of him from across the street. There he is. So this space is, I don't know, like maybe 6 feet across, something like that. I don't know exactly how far across it is, but I think that is it, except for Bill mentioning that clock winders, well, first it was bell ringers in the 1800s before we had the clock that were appointed. Their pay was better than ours. And then, of course, we had clock winders as of 1878, and that has continued to this day. And today's clock winders are as follows. You probably know these people. You probably didn't only know that they were clock winders, you probably didn't know they were clock winders. But only, I believe, George is here, right? George Martin? Yep. There he is, George Martin. In fact, Bill and myself. And then these are your other winders right here. Thank you.
Anybody has any questions, we'd be happy to try and answer them if we can. No promises, but...
Oh, and we both believe that I don't know is a perfectly legitimate answer.
I'm going to say I don't know to make up something ridiculous.
How many total pieces for that machine?
Oh, God. I don't know.
Take a guess.
A lot.
All right here.
I don't know, 4 or 5 dozen.
Oh, great idea.
Yeah. I would assume so, yeah. But of course, machining was pretty good, even in the late 1800s. I mean, machining was pretty good in the early 1800s. Just think about the machining required for locomotives and railroads. It's pretty precise stuff. Pistons and cylinders. It's got to be, the tolerances are extremely tiny on something like that.
How many different distributors are there for these parts?
Oh, They've dwindled. Yeah, it's hard to source these parts.
They almost have to be made from, like a machine shop, has to make them from scratch, pretty much.
And we got a pretty good deal on that escapement wheel too. If I'm not mistaken, I think it was $400, which is pretty good, considering it had to be hand fabricated. You know.
What was wrong with the original one?
The original one had wear on it, and it had a couple of teeth that were starting to go with the tips, and if they're not all basically perfect, that's it. You really can't bend it back or anything. So.
What hours is the clock run? Noon?
Oh, what is it, wound?
Yeah. No, what time does it go off?
Oh, every hour on the hour.
Every hour.
Every hour.
Yeah.
It's not all in one.
Yeah.
It does? Okay.
Listen.
Must be a good sleeper.
Do a lot of the area towns have clocks like that? They get wound and all that?
Other area towns? Yes, yeah. It's as a matter of fact, our contractor, Greg, I believe he services 17 towns. So it's a really neat thing, and it's a uniquely New England thing, really. And although, you know, I made my wife appreciate New England in a way more than she might have, because she sees it through my eyes. And although I grew up in New Jersey, and it's a perfectly beautiful state, and it has a lot of history. I mean, I couldn't go 15 minutes in any direction without a major Revolutionary War site in New Jersey. One of the things that got me interested in history. But you know, it's not until you get into Connecticut, you start getting near Hartford, you start seeing just the little things like stone walls. We don't have stone walls in New Jersey. And I like driving around seeing the stone walls. I made my wife appreciate that too.
If I could, there's one thing I neglected to say in my opening statements, and I owe it to Steve Schaff, because I told him I was going to tell a story. It's a quick one, but it's kind of fascinating and funny. When I was about 8 or 9 years old, actually it began my fascination with town hall, and the clock especially. I was probably 8 or 9 years old, and I was driving with my father through the center of town. And I happened to look over, and I saw this individual on the Congregational Church lawn with a rifle shooting at the clock tower. And I kind of panicked. I said, "Dad, what's going on?" He goes, "That's just Dick Harper. We're shooting pigeons." He pulled over. I begged him to pull over, and sure enough, he was clinking away up at the clock tower. And so I asked him. I said, "Well, what do you do with pigeons?" I mean, they didn't, some of them fell to the ground, but others fell inside the clock tower. And he had this kind of Yankee drawl, which I'm not going to try and imitate, but he says something to the effect of, "Well, what do you think? You're going to go up there and get them." I begged him. I'd probably tugging on a sleeve, and he finally relented and let me go with him. And so from that time forward, when I saw that, when I went up there and saw that, I was just, for a 9-year-old kid to go up and see that was kind of amazing. But I just thought I'd share that with you.
He's my great uncle.
Yeah, no, he was a character. Good guy. He used to take care of all the town buildings, and he was a character. He was a Lunenburger for sure. Going through. Any other questions?
What about the mechanisms for the individual clock faces? Were those manufactured along with the movements, or are they separate?
It is our understanding that the entire thing was assembled it's my understanding anyway, as a unit, so that when it was installed, everything from the hands in all the way down was installed, manufactured and installed at the same time. Just if I could, speaking of the history of the invention, I neglected to mention it at the time, but that escapement mechanism that keeps a pendulum operating in a precise way is to my mind, one of the top 10 greatest inventions of all time. The ability to accurately keep time. And think about what the implications of that are. It's important for commerce, farming, shipping, military operations, and just, meeting people. I mean, you're waiting for lunch at 1 o'clock. We take that for granted. 3 people had 3 different ideas of what 1 o'clock was in the year 1600, for example. Escapements started crude ones, somewhere in the 1100s, according to my research. They were much more crude than this. But the one that we know now, which is basically a deadbeat escapement, is what they call it. The best intelligence, even knowing Galileo was playing with this, and some other people, the one who's most credited with it is Christian Huygens, a Dutch physicist, and the year of perfection is roughly 1656. And just on a side note, for the importance of keeping accurate time, I thought of this book, which I've read a couple of times, and I've pushed on various members of my family to read. This is a book that relates to the problem of longitude in shipping and naval operations. A lot of shipwrecks, a lot of people lost at sea because they had no idea where they were, running out of supplies, just being hundreds of miles off target. A key to solving that problem was having a reference time that you could keep accurately. Greenwich Mean Time is what they were aiming for. So back in England, they wanted to know what time it was at home. And if they could know that, then all of their astronomical calculations were that much more accurate. So this book is about the effort that led to the solution of that problem, and the individual who ultimately solved it, John Harrison. It's it's a short read, it's 150 little pages, but it's really something else, and I really like this author too, David Sobel. She also wrote A More Perfect Heaven, which is about Copernicus, and Galileo's Daughter too. That was a really good book too that I enjoyed by her, which was telling the story of Galileo's life through his daughter's eyes. So I would highly recommend just picking this up. There was also, I think, a PBS special on this longitude as well. So that was just a little side commercial, not even for my book.
Well, thank you all for coming tonight. If there's no further questions, thank you again for coming.